A principled philosophy major's relationship with Catherine is tested when her charismatic ex, August, returns to Yale. Dive into a story of trust, jealousy, and the messy truth that love is anything but logical. The Unbearable Calculus of Former Lovers, a story of trust, jealousy, and redemption. Part 1. The Equilibrium. Brian Taylor had always believed that life was fundamentally fair, not in the childish sense that good things happen to good people. He'd read enough philosophy at Yale to know that particular fairy tale had been thoroughly debunked by approximately 3,000 years of human suffering. But he believed in a sort of karmic mathematics. If you did the work, kept your word, and treated people with decency, the universe wouldn't go out of its way to screw you over. This belief was about to be tested in ways that would have made Job suggest therapy. It was October in New Haven, and the campus had transformed into that insufferable postcard version of itself that the admissions office plastered all over their brochures. The trees were doing their annual peacocking routine in burnt orange and crimson, the Gothic buildings looked appropriately medieval and intellectual, and the air had that crisp quality that made everyone want to drink cider and pretend they'd read more Proust than they actually had. Brian was sitting in the Beinecker Rare Book and Manuscript Library, because of course he was, working on his senior thesis about Kantian ethics in modern political philosophy. The thesis was going exactly as well as one might expect from a paper that attempted to reconcile 18th century German rationalism with 21st century moral relativism. Which is to say, it was going terribly, but in that productive way that made him feel intellectually superior to his suffering. He was handsome in that annoyingly effortless way that made other men want to check if he was doing something specific with his hair. He wasn't. Dark hair that fell just so, a jawline that seemed carved with the specific purpose of making people question their own facial bone structure, and eyes that were an unsettling shade of gray, the color of a winter sky that couldn't decide whether to snow or just brood about it. He wore a simple navy sweater and jeans, because he'd learned early that trying too hard was the surest way to look like you were trying too hard. His phone buzzed. Catherine. Still alive in the library? I'm bringing you coffee because I love you and also because I need you to be functional for dinner with my parents tomorrow. He smiled. This was the thing about Catherine Thorne. She had mastered the art of affection wrapped in pragmatism. It was one of the approximately 7,000 things he loved about her. Alive is a strong word. Existing in a state of philosophical despair might be more accurate. Coffee would be appreciated. You would be more appreciated. Your romantic prowess knows no bounds. I contain multitudes, also deep thoughts about categorical imperatives. Hot. Brian leaned back in his chair, his thesis momentarily forgotten. He'd been with Catherine for 2 years now, 2 years that had felt simultaneously like an eternity and no time at all. She was beautiful in a way that made Renaissance painters look unambitious. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair that fell past her shoulders in waves that seemed to mock the concept of frizz, and eyes that were an impossible shade of green. But it wasn't her beauty that had gotten him. It was her wit, sharp enough to cut through his naturally reserved demeanor, and her kindness, which she tried to hide under layers of sarcasm, because genuine emotion made her nervous. They fit together like puzzle pieces designed by someone who actually knew what they were doing. Which is probably why the universe had decided it was time to introduce chaos into the equation. Part 2. The Variable. Catherine arrived 20 minutes later with 2 coffees and the slightly harassed expression of someone who had just survived organic chemistry. She slid into the chair across from him, pushing a cup in his direction. You look like you're contemplating the void, she said. The void is contemplating me. We've reached an understanding. Should I be jealous of this void? Possibly. It's very deep and existentially significant. She laughed, and Brian felt that familiar warmth in his chest that he'd learned meant he was probably in love with this person, which was both terrifying and wonderful in the way that most worthwhile things were. "So," Catherine said, with the tone of someone about to deliver news that ranged somewhere between mildly inconvenient and apocalyptically terrible, "I need to tell you something." Brian's internal alarm system, which had been dormant for approximately 2 years, suddenly flickered to life. "That's never a good opening," he said carefully. "It's not bad. It's just... August is back." The name landed between them like a grenade with an uncertain detonation time. August Reeves. The ex-boyfriend. The one Catherine had dated for 1.5 years before Brian. The one she'd described as a mistake wrapped in charisma and bad decisions. The one Brian had never worried about, because he was safely in California, doing whatever it was that people named August did in California. Probably something involving surfing and startups and green juice. "Back," Brian repeated, neutrally, because he was principled and calm, and definitely not feeling a small knot of anxiety forming in his stomach. "He's doing a semester visiting program at the School of Management, some innovation fellowship thing." Catherine was looking at him with those green eyes that could read him better than he could read himself.
"I wanted to tell you before you ran into us somewhere. Us. Brian. No, it's fine. You two were together. You have history. It would be weird if you completely avoided him." He meant this. He was principled. He trusted Catherine. He was also possibly going to throw up. "We're having coffee tomorrow, just to catch up. I thought it would be weirder not to." "That's completely reasonable," Brian said, with the conviction of a man trying to convince himself of something he desperately wanted to believe. Catherine reached across the table and took his hand. "You know you're the one I'm with, right? You know that matters." "I know," he said, and he did. Intellectually, he knew this with complete certainty. Emotionally, he was experiencing what could only be described as a minor existential crisis. She kissed him then, soft and certain, and for a moment the knot in his stomach loosened. Part 3. The Introduction of Chaos. Brian met August Reeves 3 days later and immediately understood why Catherine had dated him and also why she'd broken up with him. August was charismatic in the way that certain people were charismatic, effortlessly, annoyingly, and with the kind of confidence that suggested he'd never spent a single moment of his life questioning whether people liked him. He was tall, with the kind of athletic build that came from actually enjoying exercise rather than forcing oneself through it out of a sense of moral obligation. His hair was that perfect shade of sun-bleached brown that suggested either excellent genetics or an expensive stylist, possibly both, and he had a smile that had probably gotten him out of numerous traffic tickets. They ran into each other, because the universe had a terrible sense of humor, at Book Trader Cafe, where Brian had been attempting to grade papers for the Intro to Ethics class he TA'd for. "You must be Brian," August said, extending a hand with the easy confidence of someone who assumed their presence was always welcome. "Catherine's told me about you, the philosopher, right?" Brian shook his hand, noting the firm grip that lasted exactly the appropriate amount of time, not too long to be aggressive, not too brief to be dismissive. This was a man who had been to networking events. "And you're the entrepreneur," Brian said, managing a smile that he hoped looked genuine. Guilty, though entrepreneur is a generous term for someone whose first startup crashed and burned spectacularly. August laughed, self-deprecating, in a way that somehow made him more likable rather than less. "Can I buy you a coffee? I figure if we're going to be running in the same circles, we should probably not make it weird." This was clever, Brian thought. Acknowledge the potential awkwardness, diffuse it with humor, establish camaraderie. He almost respected it. "Sure," Brian said, because he was principled and mature and definitely not looking for reasons to dislike this person. They talked for 20 minutes. August was intelligent, Brian had to give him that. He spoke about his fellowship, about the intersection of technology and social impact, about the work Catherine was doing in her art history program with genuine interest and admiration. He was funny without trying too hard, asked thoughtful questions, and managed to be charming without being obnoxious. Brian hated him.
No, that wasn't fair. Brian hated that he couldn't hate him. It would be so much easier if August was obviously terrible, if he was arrogant or condescending, or any of the things that would justify the instinctive territorial feeling that Brian was experiencing. But August was none of those things. He was just there, present, in Catherine's life again. "She's great, isn't she?" August said suddenly, with a wistfulness that made Brian's internal alarm system start blaring. "Catherine, I mean, you're with her, but she's really something." "She is," Brian agreed carefully. "I was an idiot to let her go," August continued, and there was something in his voice, regret, perhaps, or calculation, or both. Young and stupid, and convinced there were 1,000 other people out there just like her. Took me about 6 months to realize there weren't. Brian said nothing. What could he say? Yes, you were an idiot. Please leave now? That seemed undiplomatic. "But she seems happy with you," August said, smiling that smile again. "That's what matters, right?" "Right," Brian said, and felt the first hairline crack form in his certainty. Part 4. The Gradual Erosion. It started small. These things always started small. Catherine mentioning that she'd seen August at a lecture. August joining their study group because he was auditing a class Catherine was in. Coffee becoming lunch, becoming drinks, becoming "a group of us are going to this thing. Do you want to come?" Brian went to these things because he was secure in his relationship and trusted Catherine and definitely wasn't quietly monitoring every interaction between her and her ex-boyfriend like some sort of emotional surveillance system. He watched August make her laugh with stories about their old inside jokes, watched her light up when he remembered details about her, how she liked her coffee, her favorite obscure artist, the way she always tucked her hair behind her left ear when she was nervous. Of course August remembered these things. He dated her. These weren't secrets. Brian knew these things too. But there was something in the way Catherine responded to August's attention, a sort of unconscious ease that came from history. They had a shorthand, a shared language of references and memories that Brian, for all his 2 years with her, couldn't quite access. "You seem quiet," Catherine said one night as they walked back from a gathering where August had been particularly entertaining. "Thinking about my thesis," Brian lied, because he was principled and didn't want to be the jealous boyfriend. "You're always thinking about your thesis." She bumped his shoulder affectionately. "Sometimes I think you love Kant more than you love me." The categorical imperative can't hold a conversation nearly as well. "Smooth save, Taylor." But she was looking at him with a slight furrow between her eyebrows, the one that appeared when she was trying to solve a problem. "Are you okay with August being around?" she asked suddenly. "Because if you're not—" "I'm fine," Brian said quickly, too quickly. "He seems like a good guy, and you two were important to each other. It's healthy that you can be friends." This was all true. It was also all completely beside the point. "Okay," Catherine said slowly, "because you can tell me if—" "I'm telling you I'm fine," Brian said, with an edge to his voice he hadn't intended. They walked the rest of the way in silence. Part 5. The Comparison. The problem, and Brian was self-aware enough to recognize it was a problem, was that he started comparing himself to August. August, who had founded a tech company at 22. Brian, who was writing a thesis that approximately 7 people would ever read. August, who told stories that made everyone lean in. Brian, who preferred listening to talking, and whose humor was dry enough to be occasionally mistaken for serious. August, who seemed to move through life with the certainty that things would work out because they always had. Brian, who had built his entire worldview on principles and careful thought and the belief that nothing should be taken for granted. "You're being weird," his roommate Marcus observed one evening, finding Brian staring at August's LinkedIn profile like it might contain the secrets of the universe. "I'm being observant." "You're being a jealous girlfriend. It's unbecoming." "I'm not jealous." Brian closed his laptop with more force than necessary. "I'm simply aware." Aware that your girlfriend's ex-boyfriend is back and is apparently God's gift to entrepreneurship and social impact? He's not that impressive. Didn't he get featured in Forbes 30 Under 30? That list is meaningless. You Googled him. Everyone Googles everyone. It's basic due diligence. Marcus threw a pillow at him. Talk to Catherine. Tell her you're uncomfortable. Use your words like the emotionally intelligent adult I know is buried somewhere under all that philosophical posturing. There's nothing to talk about. I trust Catherine. August is just there. Yeah, and you're here, slowly losing your mind.
Great system. But Brian didn't talk to Catherine, because talking to her would mean admitting he was bothered, and admitting he was bothered would mean admitting he was jealous, and admitting he was jealous would mean admitting he wasn't the calm, secure, principled person he believed himself to be. So instead, he did what he did best. He thought about it. Extensively. Obsessively. In that special way that philosophy majors thought about things, which is to say, he made it infinitely more complicated than it needed to be. Part 6. The Crack. The crack became a fracture on a Friday night in late November. There was a party, because there was always a party, at one of the graduate houses. Catherine had wanted to go. Brian had wanted to work on his thesis. They'd compromised, which meant Brian went to the party and thought about his thesis while pretending to enjoy himself. August was there, naturally, holding court in the kitchen with a group of people who seemed genuinely delighted by everything he said. Catherine was there too, laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his arm in that casual way she touched people when she was comfortable with them. Brian felt something in his chest tighten. He got a drink, then another. He wasn't much of a drinker. Alcohol made him philosophical in an even more tiresome way than usual, but tonight seemed to call for it. They look good together, don't they? Brian turned to find Melissa Chen, a mutual friend from Catherine's program, standing next to him with a drink and an expression that suggested she was stirring the pot for entertainment purposes. "They're just talking," Brian said evenly. "Oh, I know, but they have that thing, you know, that history, first love and all that." Melissa sipped her drink. "August was devastated when they broke up. Did she tell you that?" She hadn't. Apparently he wrote her all these letters, very romantic, very Jane Austen. She never responded, but still, makes you think. "About what?" Brian asked, against his better judgment. Melissa shrugged. "About whether some things are just unfinished, whether timing matters more than compatibility." She drifted away, leaving Brian with thoughts he very much did not want to be having. He found Catherine an hour later, still with August, still laughing. He touched her shoulder, perhaps more firmly than necessary. "Can we go?" She turned, surprised. "Already? We just got here." "I have work to do." "You always have work to do." There was an edge to her voice. They'd been having more of these edges lately. "Yes, well, some of us have responsibilities." "What's that supposed to mean?" August, to his credit, looked uncomfortable. "Hey, I should." "Stay," Catherine said, not looking away from Brian. "We are clearly having a moment." "Not here," Brian said quietly. "Then where? Because lately everywhere I try to talk to you, you're either working or too tired or thinking about something else." This was unfair, Brian thought. Also possibly accurate, which made it worse. They left the party. The walk back to Catherine's apartment was silent, in the way that silences before storms were silent, heavy with impending disaster. "What's going on with you?" Catherine demanded once they were inside. "Nothing." "Don't give me nothing. You've been weird for weeks. Ever since—" She stopped. "Ever since August came back," Brian finished. "Is that what this is about?" "No. Yes. I don't know." Brian ran his hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "I trust you. I do. But he's always there, and you light up around him in this way that... That what? That makes me wonder if you still have feelings for him." The words hung between them, impossible to take back. Catherine's expression went through several emotions too quickly for Brian to track. Are you serious right now? You have to admit the timing is suspicious. He comes back, suddenly he's everywhere. You're spending all this time with him? Because he's in my program, because we have mutual friends, because I'm trying to be a mature adult about the fact that someone I used to date is back in my life. And you're doing a wonderful job of it, really, very mature, especially the part where you touch his arm and laugh at all his stories. Oh my God, you're jealous. I'm not jealous, I'm concerned. About what? That I might leave you for my ex-boyfriend? Do you have that little faith in us? I have faith in us, Brian said, and his voice cracked slightly. I have less faith in the universe not being cruel enough to remind you of what you had with someone else. Catherine stared at him. August and I didn't work because he was selfish and immature and I outgrew him. You know why you and I work? Because you're thoughtful and kind and you see me as a person, not an accessory. Or at least you did. What's that supposed to mean? It means lately you've been so busy being the calm, principled, understanding boyfriend that you forgot to actually be present. You're so determined not to be jealous that you won't talk to me about how you're feeling. You'd rather suffer in silence and let it poison everything than actually be vulnerable for 5 minutes. This hit too close to home. I'm trying to do the right thing, Brian said quietly. The right thing would be trusting me.
The right thing would be talking to me instead of brooding about it like some tragic hero in a Russian novel. I do trust you. Then act like it. They stood there, breathing hard, having reached the kind of impasse that relationships sometimes reached. The kind where both people were right and both people were wrong, and there was no clear path forward. I need some space, Catherine said finally. Space. To think about us, about whether, she trailed off, about whether you want to be with me or with him, Brian finished, and the words tasted like ashes. That's not fair, isn't it? Catherine's eyes were bright with tears. Get out, Catherine, please just go. So he did, because he was principled and calm and definitely not falling apart as he walked back to his apartment through the November cold. Part 7. The Break. They didn't speak for 3 days. Brian threw himself into his thesis with the kind of manic energy that concerned Marcus enough to stage what he called an intervention, but what was really just forcing Brian to eat a sandwich and acknowledge that humans needed sustenance beyond coffee and existential dread. Call her, Marcus said. She asked for space. Space doesn't mean silence. It means not being suffocating. What if she's with him right now? Brian asked, voicing the fear that had been eating at him for 3 days. What if she's realizing that I was right, that she still has feelings for him, that... Then she does, and you deal with it. But you don't know that. You're torturing yourself with hypotheticals. Hypotheticals are all I have. You have the last 2 years. You have every conversation, every moment, every reason she chose you in the first place. That has to count for something. But did it? Brian wasn't sure anymore. Maybe August had been right. Maybe timing mattered more than compatibility. Maybe Catherine had been with Brian because August wasn't available, and now that he was, his phone rang. Catherine. Hello? His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Can you come over? She sounded tired. We need to talk. Those 4 words, we need to talk, were perhaps the most terrifying combination in the English language. Brian walked to her apartment in a daze. The campus was decorated for the approaching holidays, lights strung up everywhere, making everything look festive and mocking. He felt like he was walking to his execution. Catherine opened the door before he could knock. She looked beautiful and miserable, which seemed to sum up the entire situation. They sat on her couch, maintaining a careful distance. I've been thinking, Catherine said. That's generally considered a good thing. A ghost of a smile. You and your thesis defense mode, even now. Especially now. She took a breath. August told me he still has feelings for me. Brian's heart, which had already been in the process of breaking, somehow found a way to break more thoroughly. When? Yesterday. He said he'd been trying not to say anything, but he couldn't help it. That seeing me again made him realize what he'd lost. And Brian's voice was barely above a whisper. And I told him I'm with you. Hope flickered. Told him or reminded him? Both. Neither. I don't know. Catherine looked at him, and there were tears in her eyes. He kissed me, Brian. The flickering hope went out. And did you kiss him back? For a second, maybe two. I don't know. It happened so fast, and She was crying now. I'm so sorry. I pulled away immediately, and I told him to leave, and I haven't spoken to him since, but I can't. I can't lie to you about it. Brian should have felt upset. He wanted to feel upset. Anger would have been easier than what he actually felt, which was a sort of hollow devastation. Do you still love him? He asked. I don't know, Catherine said, and her honesty was somehow worse than a lie. I thought I was over him. I was over him. But seeing him again, having him there, it brought back all these memories of who I was when I was with him. And I think part of me wants to be that person again, wants to know if I could be, if that version of me was real or just something I was trying on. And me? Brian asked. What am I in this equation? You're the person I've built a life with. You're thoughtful and kind, and you challenge me, and you see me in ways that August never did. But I'm not him. That's not what I'm saying. Isn't it? Brian stood up, needing to move, needing to do something other than sit there and have his heart systematically dismantled. You're saying that he makes you remember passion and spontaneity and all these feelings you had before. And what do I make you remember? Thesis deadlines and philosophical debates? You make me feel safe, Catherine said, and it sounded like a confession and an apology. You make me feel like I'm home. But home is boring compared to adventure, isn't it? Brian, I've spent 2 years trying to be everything you needed. I've been patient and understanding and principled because I thought that's what love was. Showing up, being steady, not being the kind of person who makes you question things every 5 minutes. His voice was rising, all the calm he'd been maintaining for weeks finally cracking. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe love isn't supposed to be safe. Maybe it's supposed to be uncertain and chaotic and that's not who you are, Catherine finished. And I don't want you to be someone you're not. They looked at each other across the small distance of her apartment that felt like a canyon. I need to figure out what I want, Catherine said. And I can't do that while I'm with you. So I think we need to break up. There it was, the words that had been inevitable since August Reeves had walked back into their lives. You think or you know? Brian asked. I know, Catherine whispered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Brian nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He walked to the door, hand on the knob, then turned back. For what it's worth, he said, you made me feel like home too. I hope whatever you find with him, if that's what you choose, I hope it's worth it. Brian. But he was already gone, walking out into the cold November night, feeling the first snowflakes begin to fall. Nature's pathetic fallacy, he thought absently. Even the weather was being melodramatic about this. Part 8. The Aftermath. The thing about heartbreak, Brian discovered, was that it didn't happen all at once. It was incremental. It was waking up and reaching for your phone to text someone good morning before remembering you couldn't. It was seeing something funny and immediately thinking, Catherine would love this, before the reality hit. It was the phantom limb syndrome of relationships, the constant awareness of something missing. Finals came and went in a blur. Brian finished his thesis, defended it successfully, and felt absolutely nothing. His advisor commented that he seemed distracted, which was possibly the understatement of the century. He saw Catherine once, across the Benique Library Plaza. She was with August, his arm around her shoulders, both of them laughing at something. Brian turned around and walked the other way before they could see him. Marcus found him that night, staring at his laptop without actually seeing it. You need to let yourself feel this, Marcus said. I am feeling it.
No, you're philosophizing about it. There's a difference. What do you want me to say? That I'm devastated? That I feel like someone reached into my chest and pulled out everything that made me feel alive? That I wake up every morning and for about 5 seconds I forget that she's not mine anymore, and then I remember and it's like experiencing the loss all over again? Yes, Marcus said gently. That. Say that. So Brian did. He talked for 2 hours straight about Catherine and August and how he'd tried so hard to do everything right only to lose anyway. About how maybe being principled and calm and thoughtful wasn't enough. About how maybe the universe really was fundamentally unfair after all. You know what your problem is? Marcus said when Brian finally ran out of words. I'm assuming you're going to tell me. You think love is something you can logic your way through. That if you just follow the right principles and make the right choices, everything will work out. But love isn't philosophy.
It's messy and irrational, and sometimes people choose wrong, and there's nothing you can do about it. So what was the point of any of it? The point is that you loved her, really loved her, and maybe it didn't work out, but that doesn't make it meaningless. It just makes it over. Brian wanted to argue with this. His instinct was always to argue, but he couldn't. Marcus was right. It's going to suck for a while, Marcus continued. Then it's going to suck less. Then one day you'll wake up and you won't think about her first thing, and eventually you'll be okay. How long does eventually take? Longer than you want, shorter than you fear. It wasn't particularly comforting, but it was honest, which Brian appreciated. Epilogue, Spring. March came with rain and the promise of renewal, which felt almost offensively optimistic. Brian had spent the winter finishing his thesis, applying to PhD programs, and slowly, painfully, learning how to be alone again. He'd seen Catherine a handful of times. Yale's campus was small enough that complete avoidance was impossible. They'd exchanged awkward hellos. She looked happy, which was good. It was supposed to be good. Brian was working on believing that. He was at Book Trader Cafe, some habits died hard, when August sat down across from him. We need to talk, August said, and Brian felt a weary sense of déjà vu. Do we? Catherine and I broke up. Brian looked up from his coffee. When? 2 weeks ago. August looked tired, less golden than Brian remembered. I thought you should know. Why? Because I owe you an apology, and an explanation, maybe. You don't owe me anything. I kinda do, August leaned back. I came back to Yale thinking I could pick up where Catherine and I left off, that we'd been perfect together, and I'd just been too young and stupid to appreciate it. But turns out you can't go back. People change. Catherine changed. Into what? Someone who'd been with you. Someone who'd learned what it meant to be with someone. Thoughtful and present, and August laughed bitterly. Someone who wasn't me. I thought I wanted the Catherine I remembered, but she wasn't that person anymore, and I wasn't the person she remembered either. We were both trying to recreate something that didn't exist anymore. Then why? Why did she leave you for me? Because I represented possibility. What if? What if we'd met now? What if we'd both had grown up enough? It was intoxicating, that what if. But reality, he shrugged, reality was we didn't work for all the same reasons we didn't work before. We just dressed them up different. Brian didn't know what to say to this. She talks about you, August continued, a lot, actually. About how she made a mistake. About how she was scared of feeling safe with you, because safe felt boring, but boring was actually just steady, reliable, real. Is there a point to this conversation? The point is, I destroyed something good because I was selfish enough to think I deserved a second chance. And maybe I did deserve that chance, but not at the expense of what you two had. We don't have anything anymore. You could, August said, if you wanted to. She's miserable, Brian, and I know I have no right to advocate for you after everything, but someone should tell you that the principled thing, the thing Kant would probably approve of, would be forgiving her. I'm not interested in what Kant would approve of. No, you're interested in what's right, and I think you know what's right here. August stood up, put a hand on Brian's shoulder briefly, and left. Brian sat there for a long time, staring at his coffee and thinking about principles and forgiveness and whether the universe was fundamentally fair after all. He found Catherine at the Yale University Art Gallery, standing in front of a Rothko that seemed to capture the melancholy of their entire situation. "I heard," he said simply. She turned, and her eyes were red. "About August?" "Yeah. I'm sorry. I know you probably don't want to hear that, but—" "I don't," Brian admitted, "but I'm going to listen anyway." They stood side by side, looking at the painting. "I made a mistake," Catherine said. "I got scared and nostalgic, and I confused the two for something meaningful, and I lost you in the process." "You did," Brian agreed. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything. But I needed you to know that these last few months have been the worst of my life. Not because August and I didn't work out, but because I realized what I gave up, who I gave up." Brian was quiet for a long moment. "You know what the hardest part was? It wasn't that you chose him. It was that you made me doubt whether being principled and steady was enough, whether I was enough." "You were always enough," Catherine said fiercely. "I was just too caught up in what-ifs to see what was right in front of me." "So where does that leave us?" "I don't know. Wherever you want it to leave us." Brian thought about principles and ethics and doing the right thing. He thought about fairness and karma and whether good things happened to good people. He thought about Kant and categorical imperatives and the idea that morality was about treating people as ends in themselves, not means. And then he stopped thinking. "I'm not ready to get back together," he said finally. "I'm not sure I trust you not to run again when something shiny comes along." Catherine nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. But," Brian continued, "maybe we could have coffee, talk. See if there's a way back from this that doesn't involve me pretending I'm not still in love with you while also being upset at you for making me feel this way." "I can do coffee," Catherine said. "And therapy. Probably lots of therapy. So much therapy. And no more ex-boyfriends appearing out of nowhere. I'll put it in my contract with the universe." They smiled at each other, tentative and hopeful and terrified. "This doesn't fix everything," Brian warned. "I know. It might not fix anything. I know that too. But coffee is a start." "Coffee is a start," Catherine agreed. They left the gallery together, not touching but walking close. Two people who had broken and were trying to figure out if they could be put back together. It wasn't a happy ending, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was honest, which felt like enough. And somewhere, the universe smiled, because maybe, just maybe, it was fundamentally fair after all. Just not in the way anyone expected. End.
I love making these videos for you. If you liked this story, then please like, subscribe to my channel, and switch on the notifications for more entertaining stories. Please also leave a comment for any story suggestions.